fastest line is we're now planning for the next ship and putting a plan in place for version 2 of the Julia. The Julia, as she exists, is a fine vessel, and those of you who've had the pleasure of sailing her will know that she really is a luxurious vessel. However, she is 28 years old, which means realistically that we will have to change her at probably 35 to 40 years. Now, she will continue to sail successfully up into her 60s and 70s, but further south of here. Ships, as they get older, tend to move south, so she'll move to a Greece, and from there she'll move on to somewhere like the Philippines or in Indonesia, and eventually end up on a beach in India where she'll be scrapped at about the age of 70. However, we're acutely aware that in that time frame of 2016 to 2020, that we won't do the same deal in terms of acquiring a ship that we've done on this particular ship. So that's one of the challenges for us, is to put enough equity into the business and make enough profits in the business over the next few years that we are in a position to fund the next vessel, because we don't want to be back to a situation where this runs successfully for 5 years or 6 years or 7 years and then we lose the service into the region again, because I think, this week, points very clearly to all of us that it's a key part of our infrastructure here in Cork that we have access to Cork by sea. Because the President of Iceland was on the radio again this morning talking about, look guys, this is only the small volcano, we got the big one down here, and when that goes, which it's due to go somewhere in the next decade or so, and from what he was saying this morning, we're looking at a couple of years of disruption potentially in terms of air traffic in this entire region. And so I think this is a key part of our infrastructure to have regular access by sea in and out of Cork. Putting on my, I suppose, energy management hat from Longship and looking at the challenges and the opportunities for sea travel, the first thing that strikes me is that if you look at the P&L at Fastnet Line, the cost base is largely fixed, and the main driver isn't actually wages, it's oil. About 40% of the cost base is driven by the price of a barrel of oil in terms of Fastnet Line, so that the bulk of your ticket is actually going to somebody in the Middle East. And if you look at the efficiency of moving goods by sea, it's a highly efficient way of moving goods. Rail freight is probably the most efficient way of moving freight. Up here, it's grams of CO2 per ton per kilometre. That's the driver. So rail freight moves at about 38 grams per ton per kilometre. Sea freight, depending on the type of vessel, is somewhere in the region of 37 to 57, whether you're going on a fast ferry or a slow ferry. Faster actually leads to a higher number, slower is better. So actually, Fastnet Line would be to the lower end of that scale. Road freight is a little less efficient, and air freight, while for high value goods like fresh flowers coming out of Kenya and some of these stories we've seen over the last week, it's the way to go certainly. But certainly for moving heavy and bulky goods, it's a very inefficient way of moving things. As you can see there, it's more than 10 times what a ferry is at the lower end of the scale, and about 30 times at the higher end of the scale. Just to give you some perspective on air freight, the 570 number is on long haul flights. As air freight goes longer and longer distances and they fly at that 35,000 feet, and it becomes more and more efficient. Whereas the short haul, a lot of the fuel is burnt on takeoff. So the short haul air freight is very inefficient from the point of view of fuel and CO2. The same is largely true in terms of leisure travel. If you were to look at a family of 4 taking a holiday, they use about a quarter of the CO2 if they take something like the Julia to Cork than they do if they flew into Cork. So I would suggest that as a mode of transport, as you look into the next 10 or 15 years, where oil prices and energy prices are going to continue to rise, because peak oil, you can argue the toss whether it occurred in 2004, 2008, or it's going to happen in 2012. It is a reality, and we're somewhere in the top of that peak. So fuel prices and energy prices are going to escalate quite dramatically, I would suggest, within the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. And that's been widely flagged by the likes of the Kuwaiti government, Richard Branson at Virgin, all the people who maybe 5, 10 years ago were denying peak oil as a reality have now said, all right, yeah, we accept it and we've got to deal with it. So I would suggest that ferry will be a key part of the infrastructure mix. I'm not for a moment suggesting that the airport up in the hill is going to shut down or anything like that. I think air traffic will still be an important part of the infrastructure here in Cork. But it will have challenges and it will impact the types of routes that we'll be getting in and the types of load factors that will sustain those routes and the types of prices we'll pay for air travel. But I would suggest that ferry traffic is going to be a key part of the mix. So I suppose in terms of what we need to make that a reality is we need to bring more equity into the company. That's certainly by way of making profits and building our balance sheet in that way. But we will also be doing a BES towards the end of this year. We were approved for BES. We were a little bit late. This year we didn't get approved until around the 20th of December, but we'd be hoping to bring some BES into fastest line towards the end of 2010. And also in terms of the Co-Operative, we'd certainly encourage people to become members of it. There's going to be benefits for being a member in terms of cheaper ferry prices, access to the website and all the benefits that are going to be involved with being Co-Operative. But I think it's just a key part of infrastructure for any business in Cork. And I think businesses should be proud to be part of the Co-Operative. So in terms of fastest line, I think what I would say, if we're looking at this as a business community in Cork, and there are two things that we need to look at. One is I'd encourage people to become a member of the Co-Operative, and two, this year is a critical year for fastest line. I would suggest use it or lose it, and there's a real opportunity for business, which I think we've had a chance to highlight this week. But you can comfortably do a day's business on a Wednesday or a Friday in the UK out of Cork. And if you sail out on the Tuesday night sailing, you can be anywhere in England with your own car on a Wednesday and come back on the sailing Wednesday night. It's a day out of your schedule. It's really no different than flying out of Cork. The same is true on a Friday, or you can do a 3-day trip or any combination of. So it is something that is possible for a business traveller, and I think there'll be hundreds, if not thousands, of business travellers will discover that over the course of the next couple of days and have discovered over the last few days. And finally, that's the end of my presentation. I pulled this off the internet on Saturday night. This is air traffic over Europe on Saturday night, and as you can see, almost no flights, just a few down here in the south of Europe. The blue lines here are airports, the little crosses, and there's no air activity. And I suppose this highlights the importance of having ferry infrastructure. By contrast, there was almost 15,000 vessels moving around the seas of Europe at the same time, exactly the same time on Saturday night. And I suppose what's more pertinent to ourselves was that there was a hive of activity late on Saturday night down in the Irish Sea, and the little blue dot here is our Julia making her way to Swansea with almost 1,000 people on board, serving Cork, key part of our infrastructure when everything else was shut down. And I think that's what this is all about, and that's what this journey has been all about. I'd like to thank a few people who've been involved with us over the last while. In particular, Conor and Ger at the Chamber, who've been very, very keen supporters of the project since the very beginning. The members of the Co-op, which include Cork Chamber, I don't know if everybody's aware of that, but Cork Chamber are a member of the Co-op.